She told me to turn off the lights, but in that quiet office, with the glow of her eyes holding mine, I realized I couldn't, not until I really saw her, for the first time. The office always feels different after hours. During the day, it's a constant stream of voices, ringing phones, the clicking of keyboards, but when everyone leaves, silence takes over. A strange kind of silence. The kind that makes you notice the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant groan of the elevator, even the soft shuffle of your own shoes on the carpet. That night, I was still at my desk, trying to finish a report I should have done hours earlier. The only light came from the small desk lamp to my left, casting a warm pool of gold over the paperwork. Outside the windows, the city glowed faintly, streaks of neon and headlights moving across the glass. I thought I was alone, until I heard the subtle sound of heels on the polished floor. I looked up, and there she was. My boss. She wasn't just the boss, in that moment, though. Something about the quiet stripped away the layers of authority, leaving her standing there as simply a woman. She leaned lightly against the frame of her office door, arms folded, watching me with that unreadable half-smile she wore so well. "Still here?" she asked, her voice low, carrying across the empty space with unexpected softness. I nodded. "Almost done." My own voice sounded louder than I expected, breaking the hush. She stepped forward, crossing the room at an unhurried pace. The faint scent of her perfume, something elegant, like jasmine after rain, reached me before she did. I noticed the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a small, almost absent gesture, but it caught my attention more than it should have. "You work too hard," she said lightly, but there was a trace of weariness in her tone, as if she wasn't just talking about me. I smiled faintly. "You're still here too." Her lips curved just a little more, not quite a smile, but close. She looked down at the papers on my desk, her hand resting on the edge of the wood. Her nails were painted in a pale, understated shade that suited her perfectly, professional, but quietly elegant. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, close enough for me to notice the tired brightness in her eyes, the way her shoulders seemed heavier than they looked during the day. She was composed, yes, but there was a quiet vulnerability too, something she probably didn't realize she was showing. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer than before. "When you're done, make sure you turn off the lights." It was such a simple request, but the way she said it carried something unspoken. Maybe it was just the lateness of the hour, or maybe it was the way the golden lamplight brushed across her features, softening the lines of her face, making her look more approachable than she ever did in meetings. I nodded, but instead of answering right away, I found myself studying her, the way she stood there, the faint crease of thought on her forehead, the delicate contrast between her confidence and the hint of tiredness behind it. And though I didn't say it out loud yet, a thought came to me, unshakable. I didn't want to turn off the lights. Not yet. Not before I had a chance to see her as she was in that moment. Her words lingered in the quiet office. "Make sure you turn off the lights." It should have been nothing, just a casual instruction. But something in me resisted. Maybe it was the way the night wrapped around the building, the emptiness making every sound sharper, every glance heavier. Or maybe it was simply her, standing there in the warm glow of the lamp, softer than I had ever seen her, more human than the figure who commanded conference rooms all day. Before I could think better of it, I spoke. "And let me see you first." The words slipped out, low but steady, carrying across the space like a pebble breaking the surface of still water. The moment they left my lips, my chest tightened. I wasn't teasing her in a disrespectful way, I couldn't. But it wasn't quite innocent either. She paused mid-step, her eyes narrowing just slightly, as if replaying what she'd just heard. For a breath, I wondered if I'd gone too far. If she'd scold me, remind me of boundaries, remind me of my place. But she didn't. Instead, her head tilted ever so slightly to the side, curiosity flickering in her expression. A strand of hair slipped forward, brushing against her cheek, and she didn't bother to move it. The corner of her lips curved, not into a full smile, but something sharper, like she was testing the weight of my words, deciding whether they were boldness or foolishness. The desk lamp threw a halo of light across her, outlining the gentle slope of her shoulders, the grace in the way she held herself. In the dimness, she looked less like the untouchable figure I had known for months and more like someone caught between two worlds, authority and vulnerability, distance and closeness. "You should be careful," she murmured finally. Her voice wasn't stern, but it wasn't soft either. It held that deliberate neutrality she was so good at, though her eyes betrayed her. They lingered on me just a fraction longer than necessary, as if searching for something in my face. I swallowed, trying to keep my own voice even. "I only meant, it'd be a shame to turn away from the only light left in the room." Her lips parted, the smallest intake of breath, and then she gave a quiet laugh, quick, almost like she hadn't meant for it to escape. She shook her head, but not in disapproval. More like she was brushing off a thought that didn't belong, one she didn't want to entertain too deeply. "You're far too young to be talking like that," she said, though her tone had softened. I smiled faintly, not daring to push further. "Or maybe just too honest." That earned me another look, sharper this time, yet not cold. It was the kind of look that made the air between us shift, the kind that left me wondering if she was warning me away, or daring me to step closer. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned slightly, her hand brushing against a folder on my desk, fingertips grazing the paper. I felt the faintest touch of her sleeve against my arm, fleeting but enough to send a current through me. She didn't pull back in a rush. She let the contact exist for a heartbeat longer than necessary. And though she straightened soon after, her voice calm and composed, I couldn't miss the subtle change in her eyes, the glint of curiosity, the flicker of something unspoken. That single exchange, brief as it was, left me certain of one thing. I had crossed some invisible line. Not recklessly, not irreversibly, but enough to make her notice me differently. And once that happened, there was no way back. For a moment after my words, the office seemed even quieter than before. The air between us felt charged, not heavy exactly, but fragile, like if either of us moved too quickly, the spell would break. She didn't dismiss me. She didn't laugh it off. Instead, she drifted closer, her heels clicking softly against the floor until she stood near the edge of my desk. She glanced down at the stack of papers scattered in front of me, as if they were the reason she had come over, but her eyes flicked back to mine more often than to the reports. I tried to focus on the lines of text, but all I could feel was her presence. She wasn't touching me, not exactly, but she was close enough that I could sense the warmth radiating from her body, close enough that the faint rustle of her blouse seemed louder than it should have been. When she reached to straighten a file at the corner of my desk, her sleeve brushed against my arm. It was such a small thing, almost nothing, fabric against fabric, yet my skin tingled beneath the barrier of my shirt. She didn't apologize, didn't retreat. If anything, she lingered, her fingers resting lightly on the folder, as though she had nowhere else to be. I glanced up at her, and for once, she didn't look away. Her eyes held mine steadily, cool on the surface but with something searching beneath. The lamp light caught the delicate lines around her eyes, the faint shadows under them from a long day. She looked tired, yes, but also softer in this dimness, as if the night had peeled away a layer of her usual control. "You really don't mind the quiet, do you?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence without breaking the closeness. Her voice was low, carrying just enough warmth to make it feel like more than small talk. I shrugged lightly. "Not when it means I get to see a different side of this place." Her lips curved, just barely. "Different can be dangerous." The words weren't a warning so much as a confession. The way she said them, slower, quieter than her usual clipped tone, made it sound like she was talking about more than the office. I wanted to answer, but my throat felt tight. So instead, I let the silence stretch, thick with possibilities. The air smelled faintly of paper and ink, but underneath that, her perfume lingered, jasmine with something deeper, a note that clung to the edges of memory. When she finally moved again, it wasn't to leave. It was to lean slightly closer, her hand brushing against the edge of my chair as if steadying herself. The movement was subtle, casual enough to be explained away, but it left her only inches from me. I could feel the warmth of her hand near mine, could hear the faint rhythm of her breathing in the stillness. My pulse quickened. Not because anything had happened yet, but because it felt like something might. Something just out of reach, waiting in the charged quiet between us. She didn't touch me directly, not yet. But in that lingering pause, in that half-step closer, she gave me something else, a quiet acknowledgement that she felt the tension too. And that was enough to change everything. She stayed near my desk longer than she needed to. Papers straightened, folders adjusted, small, unnecessary motions that didn't disguise the fact she hadn't stepped away. I felt it in the weight of her presence, in the way her body angled slightly toward mine instead of the door. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried a softness I wasn't used to hearing from her. "I don't usually stay this late." The admission caught me off guard. My boss, the woman who seemed to thrive on control, who carried herself with such certainty, sounding almost uncertain. Her tone wasn't professional or commanding, it was personal. Quiet. Honest. "Why tonight?" I asked gently. She let out a small breath, her fingers tracing along the edge of the desk as if she needed the anchor. "Sometimes the quiet unsettles me. Makes the office feel too big. Too empty." She gave a little shake of her head, her eyes darting briefly toward the windows where the city lights glowed far below. "It's ridiculous, I know." I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice to match hers. "It's not ridiculous. Everyone feels that way sometimes. The silence just leaves too much room for your thoughts." Her eyes flicked back to mine, and for a moment they softened. She looked at me not as her employee but as someone willing to understand. The change was subtle, but I felt it like a shift in the air. She crossed her arms loosely, not defensively, but as if trying to hold herself together. "Most people think I like being here. That I live for the job. Do you?" I asked, careful not to sound too bold. A pause. Then she smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Some days, yes. Other days, it feels like it's the only thing keeping me company." Her words sank into me. She hadn't meant them to sound vulnerable, I could tell. But they did. They revealed something underneath the polished surface, something human. And the way she looked down afterward, almost as though she regretted saying it, made me realize how rare it was for her to admit such things at all. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand where it rested against the desk, but I stopped myself. Instead, I spoke. "That doesn't sound like someone who's only her job. That sounds like someone who's more, and maybe no one's taken the time to see that." Her head lifted slowly, eyes locking with mine. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, yes, but heavy in the way that truth often is. Her lips parted, as if she might respond, but she didn't. Instead, her hand moved slightly, not toward me, but closer, her fingers now just a few inches from mine on the desk. I didn't bridge the distance, though I ached to. I let the moment breathe, let her know that I saw her, not just the boss, not just the image she carried through the day, but the woman standing in front of me now, quietly vulnerable, quietly real. And for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look away. She lingered beside me longer than I could have imagined, her fingers still grazing the edge of the desk. I could feel the moment teetering, balanced between something ordinary and something that might change everything. Her eyes broke away first. She gathered the folder closest to her, flipping it closed with practiced ease. The motion was casual, but her hand brushed against mine as she reached for it. Not in a clumsy, accidental way. It was too natural, too unhurried. The contact was fleeting but electric. The coolness of her skin at first, then the warmth that seeped through as she didn't immediately pull away. My chest tightened, my breath catching before I could stop it. She noticed. I know she did. Her eyes flickered to mine in that instant, searching, calculating, but not retreating. "You're supposed to be finishing up," she murmured, though her tone carried none of the sharpness it might have during the day. It was softer now, almost playful. "I was. I replied quietly. Until you distracted me. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind that threatened to vanish if I so much as blinked. She set the folder back down, her fingers brushing deliberately against mine once more, lighter this time, as if testing what it meant to cross that invisible line. For a heartbeat, either of us moved. My hand remained where it was, hers hovering close enough that the warmth of her skin radiated against my knuckles. It wasn't a full touch, not yet, but the anticipation made it feel even more intimate. The office around us faded. The glow of the desk lamp threw our shadows against the wall, long and stretched, two figures leaning closer than they should. She exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, before saying, "You're making this complicated." Her voice carried something more than warning. There was weight to it, but also a softness, a subtle admission that I wasn't the only one feeling the pull between us. I lowered my voice. "Maybe some things are meant to be complicated." Her gaze lingered on me, steady, unflinching. Then, for the briefest moment, she let her fingers rest fully against the back of my hand. The contact was gentle, deliberate, and so slight that if someone else had walked in, they might not have noticed. But to me, it felt as though the entire room shifted. Her touch wasn't bold. It wasn't reckless. It was careful, the touch of someone who wanted to feel connection but didn't want to admit it out loud. Her skin was soft, her hand warm, and the moment it happened, I felt my pulse echo through my fingertips. The sound of the city below seemed distant, muffled by the beating of my own heart. She withdrew eventually, slowly, as though peeling herself away from something she hadn't wanted to end. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something, not regret, but recognition. We stood there, both pretending nothing had changed, when in truth everything had. And I realized, as I watched her straighten the folder with unnecessary care, that a line had been crossed. Quietly. Gently. But crossed all the same. When she finally let her hand slip away from mine, the space it left behind felt louder than the silence. I tried to focus on the papers in front of me, but the words had blurred into nothing. The only thing I could register was the faint warmth lingering on my skin and the awareness that we'd both stepped into unfamiliar territory. She didn't retreat, not completely. Instead, she gathered the folder into her arms, holding it close to her chest as if it could shield her from what had just passed between us. Her eyes were steady, but her posture betrayed something, shoulders drawn just a little tighter, breaths drawn just a little slower. Without another word, she turned and began walking toward the light switch across the room. I stood after her, the chair scraping softly against the floor, the sound startling in the stillness. She slowed her steps when she realized I was following, her gaze flicking over her shoulder, not to stop me, but to acknowledge that I was there. We walked side by side down the dim corridor of cubicles, the glow of the city filtering through the tall windows, painting faint stripes of light across the carpet. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it pulsed with things unsaid, each step weighted with restraint. When we reached the switch, she stopped. Her hand hovered above it, fingers poised but unmoving. I watched her shoulders rise and fall with a quiet breath, and then she stilled completely. I found myself standing close enough that her shoulder nearly brushed mine. The air between us felt charged, fragile, like a thread stretched too tightly. "You should head home," she said finally, her voice soft but carrying an edge of something else. Longing, maybe? Or hesitation? I swallowed, my throat dry. "And you?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She tilted her head, looking down at the floor, then up again, straight into my eyes. The moment stretched, the kind that feels endless even though it's only a few seconds. I wanted to tell her everything. That she wasn't just my boss to me anymore, that the way she lingered near me tonight had carved itself into me, that I couldn't pretend not to see her in this softer light. The words pressed against my chest, aching to be freed. But I didn't say them. Not yet. Instead, I let my gaze linger, holding hers with a steadiness I hoped conveyed what I couldn't voice. Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. She turned slightly toward me, enough that I could feel the warmth of her body radiating into the small space between us. My heart raced, and I thought for a moment that she might close the distance. Her hand lowered a fraction toward the switch, but it didn't move further. She stayed frozen there, suspended in the same uncertainty as me. It was a near confession, spoken in silence. In the way her eyes lingered, in the way her lips pressed together, in the way neither of us moved away. The city lights outside blinked faintly, casting shifting shadows across her face. And in that half-light, half-darkness, I knew we were standing on the edge of something fragile and dangerous, yet achingly real. All it would take was one word, one gesture, for everything to change. Her hand lingered over the switch, fingers hovering in hesitation, as if she knew what would happen once the lights went out. Darkness has a way of stripping away the barriers we cling to, leaving only what we feel. I stood close beside her, my pulse thrumming, the air between us charged with all the words we hadn't spoken. She glanced at me once more, her eyes steady yet vulnerable, and I understood that she was giving me a choice: to step back and pretend this moment never existed, or to stay and let it become something neither of us could ignore. I reached past her slowly, my arm brushing against her shoulder, and pressed the switch. The room went dark instantly. The steady hum of the fluorescent lights cut off, leaving only the faint glow of the city spilling in through the tall windows. We were silhouettes now, two outlines drawn together against the shimmer of distant headlights and neon. For a beat, either of us moved. Then I felt it, her hand finding my forearm in the dark. The touch was light at first, testing, almost tentative. But then it steadied, her fingers curling just enough to hold me there. My chest tightened at the warmth of her touch, the deliberate way she chose it, as though she didn't want me mistaking it for accident. "Better," she whispered, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "The dark doesn't feel so empty like this." I swallowed, the lump in my throat too thick for words. So instead, I turned slightly toward her, letting my arms shift under her hand, and in the shadows, we stood side by side, either willing to break the fragile connection. She gave a quiet laugh, a sound so rare it made my heart ache to hear it. Not the sharp laugh she used in meetings, not the polite one she gave clients, but something gentler, unguarded. "This is ridiculous," she said, though her fingers stayed where they were. "Maybe," I admitted softly. "But it doesn't feel wrong." Her head tilted toward me, close enough that I caught the faint trace of her perfume, softened now by the warmth of her skin. She didn't answer, but the silence that followed wasn't resistance. It was agreement, wordless, fragile, but real. Outside, the city seemed to move without us, cars streaming below, lights flickering in distant windows. But in that office, in the quiet dark, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us, standing in the same stillness, breathing the same air. Eventually, she released my arm, though slowly, as if reluctant to let go. "We should go," she said, her tone slipping back toward control, though not entirely. A softness lingered, something she couldn't quite mask. I nodded, and together we walked toward the door. But as we stepped into the hallway, she fell into stride beside me instead of ahead, her shoulder brushing mine in the narrow space. A small gesture, almost nothing, yet it carried all the weight of the night behind it. When we finally stepped outside, the cool night air wrapped around us. I breathed it in, grateful for the clarity, yet carrying the warmth of her closeness with me. We didn't speak of what had just happened. We didn't need to. The lights were off, but I had seen her more clearly than ever before.